What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? Emma Parker stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen, heart pounding as the notification blinked again. Elon Musk was about to unveil something the world had never seen before, a game-changing invention slated for 2025. The invitation to the secret event had landed in her inbox just hours ago. As a tech journalist who had clawed her way back from a career-derailing scandal, this could be the break she desperately needed. The air in her cramped apartment felt heavy, the hum of the city outside a distant reminder that life kept moving even as her own seemed to hang by a thread. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma thought back to her grandfather's words as a kid, the nights they spent tinkering with broken radios and old computer parts. Never stop asking questions, he'd say. And that's what she planned to do. The news about Musk's invention had spread like wildfire, but no one outside the inner circle knew what it was. Rumors whispered about breakthroughs in energy, space travel, or AI. Emma had followed Musk's career since her college days, his relentless drive, his brilliance, and his audacity to challenge the impossible. But more than that, she saw in him a reflection of her own struggles, a woman caught between skepticism and hope, trying to carve out a place in a world that often seemed stacked against her. Now, standing on the edge of this opportunity, she felt the familiar mix of excitement and fear. What if this was a trap? What if she wasn't ready? The memory of losing her job at a major tech magazine because of false accusations gnawed at her confidence. Yet here she was, about to enter Musk's orbit, invited to witness history. That invitation was not just a chance, it was a lifeline. Emma glanced at the mirror, searching for the woman who had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and countless setbacks. She saw tired eyes but a fierce determination beneath. As she grabbed her coat and headed out into the chilly New York morning, her phone buzzed again. Mark, her estranged college friend and now a rising engineer at Musk's company, had sent a cryptic message, "You sure you want in? Things aren't what they seem." Emma hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she typed back, "I'm in." No turning back. The city around her buzzed with indifferent energy as she boarded the train to California. The future was unknown, dangerous, and thrilling. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma's mind raced with the possibilities. The world was on the cusp of transformation, and she was about to be part of it. But little did she know, the journey ahead would test everything she believed in. The meaning of trust, sacrifice, and the true price of innovation. The invitation wasn't just a ticket to an event, it was an invitation to a new life, one where she might lose everything again or discover something worth fighting for. Elon Musk's invention promised to change the game, but for Emma Parker, it would become the catalyst for a personal revolution. The lights of the plane's cabin dimmed as she leaned back, clutching her notebook filled with questions. What was Musk hiding? Who could she trust? And how far was she willing to go to uncover the truth? This was her story now, a story of risk, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of hope in a world where everything could change overnight. Emma's first steps inside the sleek, ultra-modern conference hall felt like stepping into another world. The air buzzed with quiet excitement, punctuated by the soft hum of technology and whispered conversations. Screens lined the walls, displaying cryptic symbols and tantalizing glimpses of what was to come. Industry giants, reporters, engineers, and investors milled about, their faces alight with anticipation, or perhaps skepticism. Emma's heart beat faster. This was her moment. She adjusted the badge clipped to her coat, Emma Parker, tech journalist, and scanned the crowd for a familiar face. Mark was nowhere in sight, but she caught sight of Sophia, the lead engineer Mark had mentioned in passing during their last conversation. Sophia's presence was a small comfort, a hint that maybe not all of Musk's team was cloaked in secrecy or suspicion. Emma's mind raced as she tried to piece together what the invention might be. Would it solve energy crises? Revolutionize transportation? Or maybe open the next frontier in space exploration. As she moved deeper into the hall, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. The spotlight focused on a raised platform at the far end. Elon Musk appeared, as iconic and enigmatic as ever, his sharp eyes scanning the audience before a confident smile broke across his face. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady and commanding. "What we're about to unveil will change the way we live, work, and dream." The word sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Emma pulled out her notebook, fingers poised to capture every detail. But just as Musk gestured to the massive screen behind him, the lights flickered and then plunged the room into darkness. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by murmurs of confusion and concern. Seconds later, emergency lights cast a dim glow over the faces, now etched with uncertainty. Emma's pulse quickened. This was not part of the plan. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, a message from Mark: "Something's wrong. Be careful." The phrase echoed ominously in her mind as she glanced around, noting the tense expressions and whispered speculation. The blackout lasted only moments, but when the lights returned, the screen displayed a single word: delayed. The air thickened with disappointment and frustration. Elon Musk raised his hands for calm, explaining that technical difficulties had forced a postponement. "We will reschedule soon," he promised, "and you will be the first to know." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew this was more than a glitch. Something was happening behind the scenes, something they weren't ready to reveal. The crowd began to disperse, conversations now laced with suspicion. Emma's instincts as a journalist kicked into high gear. She needed answers. She followed Sophia through a side corridor, hoping to catch a glimpse of the inner workings. Sophia's face was grim but resolute. "It's more complicated than we thought," she said quietly. "There are forces at play trying to shut this down." Emma's heart pounded. Sabotage. Corporate espionage. She wasn't just chasing a story anymore, she was stepping into a battlefield. Over the next hours, Emma navigated the labyrinthine corridors, piecing together whispers and guarded conversations. She learned that the invention was a breakthrough in clean energy technology, capable of producing limitless, affordable power without environmental cost. If true, it could upend entire industries and threaten entrenched interests. As the night deepened, Emma found herself face to face with Elon Musk himself in a small conference room. His expression was a mix of fatigue and fierce determination. "You want to know the truth," he said, eyes locking onto hers. "This invention is our last chance to save the planet. But it's also made us targets." Emma swallowed hard, aware of the weight of his words. She knew the stakes were higher than she ever imagined. Returning to her hotel, Emma couldn't sleep. The city lights outside blurred as her mind raced through every detail. She thought about her grandfather's advice, about the strength it took to keep asking questions even when the answers were hard. The next morning, Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Mark: "Meet me. We need to talk." At a quiet cafe, Mark revealed what he had discovered overnight: a conspiracy involving powerful corporations lobbying to suppress the invention. Their conversation was tense, filled with unspoken regrets and old wounds. Yet beneath the friction was a shared resolve to expose the truth. Emma realized that this story was bigger than her career. It was about justice, about the future, and about the people who dared to dream against all odds. As days passed, Emma delved deeper, balancing her roles as reporter, confidant, and sometimes skeptic. She faced moments of despair when sources dried up or threats whispered in the dark. But she also found allies, like Sophia and Mark, who reminded her that hope was not naive but necessary. The world outside remained unaware of the drama unfolding behind closed doors. Headlines speculated about delays and rumors, but Emma knew the real story was far more complex. She crafted her articles carefully, weaving facts with the human stories that brought the invention's impact to life. Through it all, she felt a transformation within herself. The woman who once feared losing everything was finding new strength in vulnerability and truth. Then came the breakthrough. A secret test of the invention succeeded beyond expectations, offering a glimpse of the power to change energy forever. Emma witnessed the moment, the light in Musk's eyes, the engineer's cautious smiles, the crowd's tentative applause. Yet just as hope blossomed, the sabotage returned. Data was corrupted, prototypes damaged, and trust shattered. Emma stood at a crossroads, forced to choose between silence and exposure, between loyalty and integrity. She chose truth. Publishing her story despite threats, Emma sparked public outrage and support. The movement to protect the invention swelled, forcing regulators to act and the conspirators to retreat. In the aftermath, Emma stood beside Musk at the official unveiling, the invention finally revealed in all its promise. The world watched as clean energy took center stage, a beacon of hope amid uncertainty. Emma's journey had come full circle, from doubt to courage, from loss to purpose. She looked out at the crowd and thought of her grandfather's voice, guiding her still, never stop asking questions. What had started as a story had become a mission, a testament to resilience and the power of belief. As the applause washed over her, Emma knew this was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it, with hope, with love, and with the unyielding spirit that pushes us all forward when things get tough. Emma sat quietly in her small apartment, the glow of the city lights filtering through the blinds casting long shadows on the walls. She pulled her knees close to her chest, her mind drifting back to the childhood that had shaped her into the woman she was today. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Detroit, life had never been easy. Her father left when she was just 6, disappearing without a word, leaving her mother to raise Emma and her younger brother on a paycheck that barely covered the rent. Emma remembered the nights when her mother would come home exhausted, yet somehow still find the strength to sit beside her and read stories. It was those moments that sparked Emma's early fascination with technology and invention. Her grandfather, a retired engineer, became her secret mentor. He taught her how to take apart old radios and computers, patiently explaining the magic behind the circuits and wires. Emma's fingers still bore faint scars from those early experiments, a reminder of a passion that refused to fade. But life was never simple. School was a struggle, not because Emma lacked intelligence, but because the weight of responsibility often pulled her down. She juggled part-time jobs, helping her mother with bills, while secretly dreaming of a career where she could make a real difference. The path wasn't smooth. College was a battlefield of self-doubt and relentless pressure. Emma formed a close friendship with Mark, a brilliant but reserved engineering student. They bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of changing the world with innovation. But as their lives progressed, so did the distance between them. Emma's career as a tech journalist blossomed, and Mark took a role at one of the country's leading tech firms, Elon Musk's SpaceX division. Their paths diverged, and a misunderstanding drove a wedge between them that neither dared to bridge for years. Then there was the scandal that nearly destroyed Emma's career. A story she had been chasing for months about a corrupt tech startup blew up in her face when a source she trusted turned out to be fabricating evidence. The fallout was brutal. Emma lost her job, her credibility, and nearly her confidence. Friends distanced themselves, and the media world that once welcomed her became a cold, unyielding place. For months, she retreated into herself, questioning every decision and every dream she'd held onto so tightly. It was during those dark days that the lessons of her childhood echoed louder than ever. Her grandfather's words, "When the world turns its back, find the fire inside." Emma began to rebuild, taking freelance jobs and small assignments, slowly regaining her footing. The invitation to Musk's unveiling came at a fragile moment, a chance to reclaim not just her career but her sense of purpose. Relationships had always been complicated for Emma. She carried the weight of estrangement from her family, her brother now distant, her mother aging and frail. Love was a complicated story as well, filled with fleeting connections and painful goodbyes. Yet beneath the surface, Emma's heart remained open, fueled by a deep-seated belief in the power of connection and redemption. Mark's message had reopened old wounds but also a glimmer of hope. Could they find common ground again in the shadow of Musk's groundbreaking work? The night before the event, Emma's phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "Proud of you," it said simply. It was the first time in years they had exchanged words like that, and it filled Emma with a bittersweet warmth. As she packed her bag for the trip to California, memories flooded back, the sacrifices her mother made, the dreams they both held despite the hardships. Emma knew that beyond the glitz and glamour of the tech world, this was a personal journey. She was not just chasing a story, she was reclaiming her life. On the flight west, Emma stared out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The future was uncertain, filled with questions and challenges she could not yet see. But one thing was clear, she was ready to face whatever came next. Emma's past was not a chain holding her back but a foundation upon which she would build her new beginning. When she arrived in California, the air felt different, electric, charged with possibility. The city buzzed with innovation, a stark contrast to the quiet streets of her hometown. She met Sophia, the lead engineer, and was struck by her quiet strength and fierce determination. Sophia's story was different but no less compelling, a woman who had battled against the biases of a male-dominated field to earn her place. The two women found common ground instantly, sharing late-night conversations about resilience and hope. Emma's relationship with Mark remained tense, but beneath the surface, a fragile thread of trust began to weave itself anew. They both understood the stakes and the cost of failure. Emma felt the weight of her own expectations pressing down, but also the steady support of those around her. It was a delicate balance between vulnerability and strength. As the days passed, Emma delved deeper into Musk's world, navigating the high-stakes environment of innovation and secrecy. The pressure mounted, and memories of past betrayals whispered warnings in her ear. Yet every setback was met with moments of hope, an encouraging word from Sophia, a glance from Mark that said, "We're in this together," or Musk's unwavering belief in the mission. Through it all, Emma learned that the journey was not just about uncovering a story but about rediscovering herself. She confronted fears she had buried for years, the fear of failure, of rejection, of being alone. Each challenge chipped away at the walls she had built, revealing a woman who was stronger and more determined than she had ever realized. Emma's emotional landscape was complex. She grappled with the ghosts of her past while stepping into a future filled with possibility. The invention itself was more than a technological marvel, it was a symbol of hope, sacrifice, and the unyielding human spirit. In the quiet moments before the big unveiling, Emma found herself reflecting on the lessons life had taught her. Love, she realized, was not just about relationships but about the love of a dream, the love of truth, and the courage to keep moving forward despite the odds. Family was not just those bound by blood but the people who stood by you in your darkest hours. Sacrifice was painful but necessary for growth. And hope was the light that pierced even the darkest night. Emma's story was unfolding not just on the stage of technological revolution but within her own heart. The woman who had once felt lost and broken was now ready to step into the light, ready to fight for a future where innovation and humanity could coexist. She had learned that life was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but it was also beautiful, filled with moments that made every struggle worthwhile. As she prepared to face the challenges ahead, Emma felt a quiet resolve settle within her. This was more than a story. It was a journey of redemption, of healing, and of discovery. She was ready to write the next chapter, one filled with courage, hope, and the unwavering belief that no matter how hard life might get, the human spirit could always find a way to shine. The days following Elon Musk's postponed unveiling were marked by tension and uncertainty. Emma found herself caught in a web of conflicting emotions and growing dangers. As she dug deeper, the first major conflict arose when a trusted source leaked that powerful corporate interests were actively working to suppress Musk's invention. Emma's phone buzzed with anonymous warnings, "Stop digging or face consequences." Fear crept in, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce determination not to let fear control her. Mark, once distant, became an unexpected ally. He revealed that behind the sleek facade of innovation, internal battles were raging. Some executives feared the invention's impact would destroy their established profits. The corporate board was split, and sabotage wasn't just a possibility, it was happening. Emma's journalistic instincts urged her to expose these forces, but she also sensed the delicate balance Musk needed to maintain. The tension in the company reminded her of her own fractured past, trust broken, loyalties questioned. One night, while reviewing documents in her hotel room, Emma received a chilling message. Her hotel reservation was cancelled abruptly, and unknown figures had been spotted near her apartment in New York. It was a stark reminder that this story was bigger, and darker, than she'd imagined. Yet, just when despair threatened to overwhelm her, Emma found hope in the small, unexpected moments. Sophia invited her to a late-night brainstorming session, sharing her vision of the invention's potential to transform lives. Their conversation was a balm to Emma's weary spirit. Mark, too, showed a side of himself she hadn't seen in years, a friend willing to fight alongside her. The fractures in their relationship began to heal as they faced the external threat together. But the rising conflict wasn't just external. Emma wrestled with her own doubts and fears, haunted by memories of betrayal and failure. Could she trust Mark again? Could she trust herself? The pressure mounted as deadlines loomed and public interest grew. Every step forward seemed met with resistance, every breakthrough shadowed by sabotage. In one harrowing moment, a critical prototype was destroyed in what appeared to be arson. The news hit the media, and skepticism swelled. Was the invention a hoax? Emma stood in the eye of the storm, fighting to keep the truth alive. The climax, hope, climax rhythm played out in her daily life. A crushing setback, hope flickering in a supportive gesture, then another blow. When a key engineer resigned under mysterious circumstances, Emma felt the weight of isolation. Yet Sophia's unwavering resolve reminded her that the team's spirit was unbreakable. Together, they uncovered evidence pointing to corporate espionage and even threats to their personal safety. Emma's reporting began to expose the conspiracy, igniting public outrage and support. But just as momentum built, the climax hit again. A confidential source close to Elon Musk vanished without explanation. The fear was palpable. Had the stakes become too high? In the chaos, Emma's relationship with Mark was tested. Old wounds resurfaced as trust wavered, but they found solace in their shared mission. The tension was raw, the emotional stakes higher than ever. Emma's internal battle mirrored the external conflict. She questioned her place in the story. Was she a pawn or a player? Yet each moment of despair was met with a spark of hope, a message from her mother, a smile from Sophia, a whispered encouragement from Mark. These moments kept her grounded, reminding her why she fought. As the conflict escalated, Emma realized the invention was more than a technological breakthrough, it was a symbol of resistance against forces determined to maintain the status quo. The stakes were no longer just about energy or technology but about power, control, and the future of humanity. Emma's role transformed from observer to participant, caught in a whirlwind of danger and determination. The rising conflict propelled her into new territory, investigations that uncovered layers of deception, alliances that shifted like sand, and betrayals that cut deep. She learned that hope was not naive but a necessary force to counterbalance the darkness. The climax after climax played out in her mind and her world, a relentless cycle that tested her resolve. At times, the pressure felt suffocating, but Emma's spirit refused to break. She clung to the belief that truth and courage could prevail. As public support grew, the movement to protect Musk's invention gained momentum. Activists, scientists, and everyday people rallied behind the cause, shining a spotlight on the conspiracy. Emma's articles became a voice for change, her words carrying the weight of countless struggles and sacrifices. Yet the personal cost was undeniable. Threats intensified, and trust was fragile. Emma navigated a world where allies could turn into enemies, and every revelation brought new challenges. Through it all, she learned to rely on the strength within herself and those she trusted most. The rising conflict was a crucible, forging Emma into a woman ready to face whatever came next. As she prepared for the next phase of the journey, Emma felt a profound shift within. The battles she fought were not just for a story or a career but for a vision of a better world. The invention represented hope, not just for cleaner energy but for humanity's capacity to rise above fear and greed. In the eye of the storm, Emma found clarity. The journey was far from over, but the path forward was illuminated by courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of shared purpose. The rising conflict had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately transformed her. The invention was no longer just Elon Musk's secret, it was a beacon calling out to those willing to fight for the future. Emma's story was entwined with that future, a story of conflict and hope, loss and strength, shadows and light. The transition from rising tension to full-blown chaos came faster than anyone expected. Emma found herself in the center of a storm that no one could fully control. Just 3 days after the arson attack on the prototype lab, she received an encrypted message through an anonymous source that contained schematics, access logs, and internal emails, proof that someone on the inside had not only sabotaged the invention but had also been feeding information to a coalition of powerful energy conglomerates determined to bury the technology permanently. The files were explosive. She stared at the data on her laptop in a dim corner of the Tesla campus coffee shop, her stomach tightening as she pieced it together. Names she recognized, including one member of the board and 2 high-ranking engineers. She needed confirmation before publishing anything. She also needed protection. She closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and dialed Mark. He met her within the hour, wearing a gray hoodie and that half-concerned, half-cynical look he always wore when things were about to get bad. "If this is real," he said, scrolling through the files, "you've got something that could take down half the corporate backers behind the project." His voice lowered, almost to a whisper. "And they will do anything to stop you." That night, Musk's team relocated the entire engineering division to a temporary off-site facility, undisclosed, high security, and protected by both digital and physical firewalls. Emma was allowed in, not as press, but as part of a small trusted circle. It felt surreal to walk past security checkpoints, biometric scanners, and steel doors, her press badge replaced by a temporary access card with a bold red border, non-disclosure required. Inside the compound, the atmosphere was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Engineers slept in shifts. Cots lined the corridors. Whiteboards filled with equations and designs covered every available wall space. Screens displayed heat signatures, data flow, and drone surveillance outside the compound perimeter. There was tension in every glance, urgency in every step. This wasn't a tech startup anymore, it was a battleground. Musk himself looked more human in this space, stripped of the stage lights and media polish. His eyes were red-rimmed, his speech less rehearsed, his gestures more spontaneous. He moved from workstation to workstation like a field general, listening, advising, pushing. And he welcomed Emma not with guarded caution but with a surprising degree of trust. "You want to know what this is really about?" he asked her late one night as they sat alone in a small meeting room that smelled faintly of coffee and solder. "It's not about energy. It's about control. We're not just building a new power source. We're giving people freedom from the systems that profit from scarcity. That's what they're trying to kill." He handed her a tablet showing a simple simulation, a home powered entirely by the device they were building, not for a week or a month, but indefinitely. "This changes everything. That's why they're afraid." Emma felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. The stakes weren't theoretical. They were existential. Over the next few days, she embedded with the engineering team, observing the rapid redesign of the damaged prototype. She learned the core of the invention was something called quantum lattice fusion, a breakthrough method of generating power by manipulating subatomic fields within rare earth elements. The energy output was near limitless, and the footprint was smaller than a toaster. It didn't require solar panels, wind turbines, or nuclear cores. It could power a hospital or a house. It could fit in a backpack or run a city block. It was, in a word, disruptive. But its fragility was also its danger. The tech needed stabilization, and the core module required materials that were tightly controlled by a handful of global suppliers, many of whom were already pulling out of their contracts under pressure. One by one, pieces of the puzzle began to fall apart. That was the next climax. A truck carrying vital stabilizer components vanished somewhere between a manufacturing site in Nevada and the compound. The company that built the magnetic shells for the device declared bankruptcy overnight. Someone on the legal team leaked that 2 patents had been quietly stolen. It felt like the invention was being dismantled in real time. But then came the hope. Sophia, who had been working for 48 hours straight on a workaround, burst into the engineering bay with a grin on her face and a flash drive in her hand. She'd found a way to replicate the stabilizer shell using 3D printed alloys that hadn't been tested at this scale, but early simulations showed promise. The team erupted in cautious celebration, and Emma found herself swept up in a moment of raw human triumph. They weren't just fighting off sabotage, they were evolving, adapting, pushing forward. And as the sun rose over the compound, casting long golden light across the workshop floor, Emma realized she was witnessing something holy in its own way, not just a scientific breakthrough, but a convergence of belief, skill, and purpose. That moment of hope did not last. The next evening, while Emma and Mark were reviewing security camera footage of the compound's perimeter, they spotted an anomaly, a flash of movement in a blind spot. Within minutes, the power surged, monitors blinked out, and the building plunged into emergency lockdown. They were under attack. Not in the sense of guns or bombs, but digital warfare. Firewalls breached, data corrupted, backup servers overwritten. It was clear someone had gained access to their internal systems. Panic rippled through the compound. For a brief moment, Emma was back in the nightmare of her career collapse, when everything she had worked for vanished with one lie, one twist, one false step. But this time, she didn't freeze. She moved. She followed Sophia into the server room, where a backup drive was being manually disconnected. They couldn't rely on the cloud or remote storage. Everything had to be physically secured. Emma carried the drive like it was a heart transplant, her breath tight, her mind locked in focus. Musk appeared again, rallying the team, not with grand speeches but with calm commands. The lights flickered back on, systems rebooted, the breach was sealed. But they had lost 14 hours of data. The entire calibration model had to be rebuilt. That night, Emma sat in silence outside the compound, watching the stars. The weight of the journey settled into her chest. She was exhausted, scared, and overwhelmed, but she was also more certain than ever that she was exactly where she needed to be. The climactic journey had shifted her entire understanding of what it meant to tell the truth, not just report facts, but fight for meaning. Musk's invention wasn't just a story. It was a revolution. And revolutions weren't clean. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerous. But they were also necessary. The next morning, as the team returned to the lab, the mood was somber but focused. Emma stood beside Sophia and Mark, watching as the new prototype, the third since she had arrived, was powered up. The room went quiet as the machine's pulse stabilized. The monitor displayed the output curve. And then it happened. A perfect line. Smooth. Sustained. Controlled. The power source had stabilized. For 5 seconds, then 10, then 30, it held steady. No explosions. No shutdowns. No failure. Just pure, silent energy. It was the beginning of something none of them could yet describe but all of them could feel. Emma pressed record on her voice memo app. Not for a story. For history. The hum of the stabilized prototype lingered in the air like a held breath, vibrating faintly beneath the floor as though the building itself was aware of what had just happened. For a full minute, no one in the lab moved. No one spoke. The readings on the monitor remained perfect, clean, consistent, sustainable energy being produced at a level that no one had seen outside of theory. Emma felt the pressure behind her eyes, a lump building in her throat that she didn't expect. It wasn't just scientific success. It was relief, awe, maybe even fear. Musk leaned closer to the screen, then looked at Sophia, his voice a low whisper. Save every frame. Secure the data in triplicate. We'll never have another first time like this. But even as Emma watched the team erupt into quiet cheers and cautious embraces, the elation was cut short. A red warning icon suddenly appeared on the screen, blinking ominously. Sophia's fingers flew over the keyboard. It's not the prototype. It's the network. The secure server had just pinged an unauthorized signal from outside the compound. Someone had been watching them. Tracking them. Possibly even receiving their internal feeds. The celebration froze. The energy in the room changed. A new layer of dread sank in. For the last several days, they had been consumed by the physical threats, fires, failed deliveries, digital breaches. But now they faced something worse, surveillance from within. Elon immediately ordered a full digital sweep of the compound. Engineers scattered, checking drives, security nodes, cameras. Emma stepped back, notebook forgotten, her instincts flipping from observer to survivor. You think someone's still feeding them? She asked quietly. Or planted something here? Mark nodded, his jaw tight. Could have been here from the beginning. Before we ever moved to this site. A deep silence followed, the kind that only came when trust was on the edge of collapse. Hours passed. The engineers shut down all network activity, isolating the prototype from any signal input. Musk called an emergency closed-door meeting with the leadership team and Emma, who was now considered part of the inner circle. Not as a journalist, but as someone who knew too much to be left out. That's when it happened. The emotional climax. The moment when everything cracked open. Musk stood at the head of the small glass conference room, the city lights dim behind him. We've done it. We've created something that can outlast oil, gas, and grid dependency. And because of that, we've drawn fire from every major energy stakeholder on the planet. What we do next will determine whether this lives or dies. His eyes scanned the group. So let's be honest. No more secrets. We need to know who we can trust. That was when Sophia spoke. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. There's something I haven't told you. She looked directly at Musk. I was approached before this prototype was built. A consulting firm working for a fossil fuel consortium offered me $7 million to walk away. They didn't want me to sabotage anything, just disappear. Quietly. Emma felt her stomach twist. Why didn't you tell anyone? She asked. Sophia took a breath. Because I didn't want anyone to question my loyalty. Because I thought I could outrun it. But they've been watching me. And I think I know how they got in. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. 2 weeks ago, I sent our first prototype's energy yield numbers to my external hard drive for my own modeling. I thought it was secure. I was wrong. I found remote access logs this morning. The room fell silent. Then, Musk nodded. Thank you for telling the truth. That's the only way we win. We can't build the future on secrets. But it wasn't over. Mark stood abruptly, his expression pained. Then I need to say something too. Emma turned sharply. Mark's face had gone pale. 4 years ago, I worked for one of those firms. Not for long. I didn't know what they were doing. But when I realized they were stealing early-stage clean energy patents, I walked. I filed a whistleblower report. I thought I buried it. His voice broke. But I think they know I'm here. I think they followed me to this project. The emotional weight in the room was unbearable. People who had worked side by side for months now stared at each other through new eyes, people with secrets, with pasts, with consequences that had finally caught up to them. Emma's chest tightened. She remembered what it felt like to be the target of doubt, to have people question your intentions. She stood slowly. Then maybe I should speak, too, she said. You all know me as the reporter who exposed a corrupt startup and nearly lost everything. What you don't know is that I almost didn't come here. I almost turned down this assignment because I was afraid. Not just of failing again. But of caring too much. Of believing in something and watching it collapse. But I stayed. I stayed because this isn't just a story to me anymore. It's personal. I grew up in a house where we lost power every other month. Where we lit candles instead of paying bills. I know what this invention means to real people. So if we're going to be honest. I'm scared, too. But I believe in this. And I believe in all of you. No one moved for a moment. Then Sophia walked over and hugged her. One by one, the team members nodded, not just in agreement, but in solidarity. For the first time, all their truths were on the table. That night, Emma sat outside the compound, the night air cool against her skin, and reflected on what had just happened. She felt raw, exposed, but lighter somehow. She thought about her grandfather's words again, you can't fix what you won't face. And now, finally, they had faced it. But of course, nothing ever stayed simple. Hours later, an emergency alert blared across the compound. Musk rushed to the lab. The prototype's energy levels were spiking uncontrollably. Sophia and her team scrambled to stabilize it. Red warning lights pulsed across the workstations. It's a cascade failure, someone shouted. A software override was just triggered remotely. Another attack. Emma watched in horror as the screens lit up with code, lines of unauthorized input seizing control of the core's modulation functions. Sophia cursed under her breath, typing furiously to intercept the breach. Mark ran to the emergency kill switch panel. Do we shut it down? He yelled. We might lose everything, Sophia shouted back. Or blow a hole in the ceiling. Emma couldn't breathe. She stood frozen, helpless as the team tried to wrest control from an invisible enemy. The prototype buzzed louder, the lights flickering overhead. Musk's voice cut through the chaos. Override the command line. Isolate the loop. Sparks flew from one of the consoles. Someone screamed. Emma ducked as a monitor exploded, glass raining down around them. Then, silence. Sophia slammed a final key. The machine powered down. The red lights dimmed. The buzzing stopped. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Mark exhaled slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. We shut it down. Just in time. Emma stared at the machine, now dark and still. The emotional high from earlier had shattered. They had been seconds away from catastrophe. Again. And now they had proof that the enemy wasn't done, not even close. But amid the devastation, there was a strange sense of peace. They had survived. They had told the truth. They were still standing. That night, as Emma sat in a makeshift break room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the prototype smolder in the corner, she opened her notebook again. She began writing, not an article, but a letter. To herself. To the future. To anyone who might someday ask what it felt like to be on the edge of a world-changing invention and know, in your bones, that it might cost everything. And still, you choose to fight. The morning after the failed sabotage attempt, sunlight spilled across the scorched prototype room like a benediction. Emma walked slowly through the compound's corridors, past the makeshift cots and empty coffee cups, the quiet hum of machines returning to their steady rhythm. The worst had passed, but no one moved quite the same. There was a quietness, a reverence, as if the compound itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Emma paused at the observation window, looking in on the machine that nearly destroyed everything. The casing was scorched, one panel missing, and internal wires dangled like veins from an open wound. But it was still intact. The core module had survived. So had the team. So had she. Hours later, the security review confirmed what they all feared. The source of the attack was traced to a series of command injections routed through a third-party software module, code that had been added innocently by a subcontractor 2 months earlier. A backdoor. It had been sitting there like a landmine, waiting for a signal. The terrifying part wasn't the breach itself. It was how close they had come to losing not just the project, but each other. But something had shifted in the aftermath. Elon Musk ordered the entire facility shut down for 72 hours, not out of defeat, but reflection. "You don't build the future while running from the past," he told the team. "We clean this out, we secure the system, and we do this right." And so, the rebuilding began. Not just of wires and drives and code, but of trust. Of purpose. The team, once scattered in fear, now moved with quiet unity. Sophia worked alongside Mark, their past differences forgotten. Emma noticed the way they exchanged glances, tired, yes, but grounded in mutual respect. They had been through fire together. And fire forges steel. Emma took long walks around the facility perimeter during those quiet days, scribbling notes in her weathered notebook. Not for a story, at least not yet, but for herself. She wrote about her grandfather, about the radio parts they used to fix on the kitchen table. She wrote about the flickering lights in her childhood home, the silence that filled the room when the power went out. She wrote about fear, and about the way truth always seemed to rise through it, like grass through concrete. And finally, she wrote about love. Not romantic love, but the kind that endures, the love of a mother who never gave up, even when the world did, the love of a friend who stood beside her in crisis, the love for something bigger than herself, a belief that technology could heal instead of divide. On the second night of the shutdown, Mark found her on the roof of the compound, wrapped in a borrowed hoodie, watching the stars. "You ever wonder," he said, sitting down beside her, "what life would have been like if we never drifted apart?" She didn't look at him. "All the time." He hesitated. "I read your old stories after you left the Times. Even the one that blew up. You were trying to tell the truth. I should have defended you." "You did," she said softly. "You just didn't say it out loud." They sat in silence. Below them, the city stretched toward the horizon, pulsing with artificial light. But up here, it was quiet. Honest. "Do you think they'll let it happen?" she asked after a while. "The invention. The rollout. The world's not ready for it." Mark sighed. "The world's never ready. That's why we do it anyway." On the third day, the full team gathered in the main lab. The room had been scrubbed clean, the wires rerouted, the system rewritten from the ground up. The prototype had been rebuilt with the new stabilizers Sophia invented during the crisis. This was no longer a test. This was the real thing. Elon Musk entered the room without fanfare. He didn't give a speech. He simply walked to the console, looked around the circle of engineers, and said, "This is for every kid who had to do homework by candlelight. Let's light it up." The power switch was flipped. The machine purred to life. But this time, something different happened. Instead of readings on a screen or simulated output, a small metal hub attached to the prototype powered on, a real-world application device Emma hadn't seen before. A nearby panel lit up. A monitor booted. A heater began to hum. The device was powering them. Live. In real time. Clean energy, silent and pure, flowing from a device no larger than a desktop tower. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes before she even realized it. She wasn't alone. Around the lab, People stood silently, some clutching hands, others just staring. Musk turned toward Emma and nodded once, like a private acknowledgement. She nodded back. It was done. That evening, Emma sat alone in the small office Musk had loaned her to write. She opened a new document and began typing her story. But not the one the world expected. She didn't start with science or sabotage or even with Musk's name. She started with a question: what if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? She told the story not of a machine, but of the people behind it. The pain, the failures, the betrayals, the forgiveness. She wrote about Mark and Sophia, and the quiet strength they carried through chaos. She wrote about truth, and how fragile it was, and how powerful. And she ended with a line she hadn't planned until it spilled from her heart onto the page: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. When she finished, she closed her laptop and sent the story, not to her editor at the Chronicle, but to the independent outlet that had first published her freelance work during the worst period of her career. It felt right. Honest. Free. The next day, Musk gave a short press conference. The Invention, now officially named the Novacore, would enter limited release by Q4. He refused buyouts, refused patent hoarding, refused partnerships with legacy energy conglomerates. This belongs to humanity, he said simply. Not shareholders. The crowd erupted. The media called it the modern moon landing. Wall Street panicked. Politicians scrambled. Activists cheered. But none of it mattered to Emma as much as the quiet text she received from her mother that night. It said, "I watched the whole thing. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of who you've become." Emma sat in her hotel room, holding her phone like it was something sacred. She thought about everything that had led her here. The darkness. The doubt. The endless setbacks. And now, finally, the dawn. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Forces would still fight to stop the rollout. Skeptics would question it. Saboteurs might try again. But the truth had already been lit like a fuse. And it wouldn't go dark again. Emma's journey had come full circle. She didn't just report on the future. She helped shape it. And in the process, she reclaimed her voice, her purpose, and the unshakable belief that even in the darkest moments, hope survives. The final scene played out not in a lab or a press room but at a small diner on the edge of the desert. Emma, Mark, and Sophia sat at a cracked Formica booth, drinking burnt coffee, laughing softly, exhausted and relieved. No cameras. No headlines. Just 3 people who had faced the fire and made it through. And when the check came, Musk's name was scribbled in the corner of the receipt with a smiley face. Paid in full. The quiet didn't last. Within 48 hours of the Novacore press announcement, the world began to shift. Financial markets wobbled, major energy companies issued vague but pointed press releases about evaluating new technologies, and a coordinated smear campaign took hold online. Anonymous sources suddenly flooded headlines with stories questioning the invention's safety, accusing Elon Musk of endangering public infrastructure, and even speculating that the demonstration was staged. Emma watched the firestorm unfold from her apartment in New York, surrounded by unpacked bags and printed pages of her article that had gone viral within hours of publication. Tens of thousands of comments flooded in. Some called her a hero. Others, a sellout. There were messages of gratitude from families who dreamed of energy freedom, and death threats from those who saw her as part of some radical agenda. She scrolled past the vitriol, exhausted and unsurprised. History never liked to change. Mark called her on the second day of the media blitz. "They're coming after you now," he said. "Saw your name trending next to Musk cultist. Welcome to the resistance." She laughed bitterly. "It's déjà vu. Except this time, I'm not alone." That made all the difference. A week after the Novacore reveal, a quiet summons came from Tesla HQ. Elon had assembled a small task group to handle the rollout, and Emma had a seat at the table. "You're not just reporting anymore," he told her. "You understand the story better than most of us. And you know how to talk to people. That's what we need now." The goal wasn't just launch. It was survival. They needed to prepare the public for the biggest disruption in modern energy history. Their first task was forming what Musk called the 10 pilot locations around the world, chosen not by market demand but by human need. Emma sat in a glass conference room alongside Sophia, Mark, and 6 engineers from SpaceX, Neuralink, and SolarCity, staring at a map dotted with pins. Rural Alaska. Sub-Saharan Africa. A Brazilian favela. A Syrian refugee camp. A remote Aboriginal community in Australia. A South Dakota reservation. A fishing village in the Philippines. A war-torn district in Ukraine. A flood-prone township in Bangladesh. And a blighted tenement in Detroit. 10 places where the Novacore could prove itself beyond hype, where it could literally save lives. The decision was bold, reckless, and exactly right. Emma volunteered to oversee the Detroit site, not just because it was domestic, but because it reminded her of home. Places where power flickered as much from poverty as from broken wires. As she flew into the city 2 weeks later, the skyline looked tired, the streets beneath it lined with decay and dignity in equal measure. Her contact on the ground was a community organizer named Nia, a woman in her 50s who wore steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. "You're the reporter," Nia said, arms crossed when they met at the community center. "You're not here to make us look poor for your story, are you?" "No," Emma said honestly. "I'm here to prove that the future starts here." Nia studied her a moment, then nodded. "Then let's get to work." The installation of the Novacore in Detroit took place inside an abandoned church, long since converted into a food pantry and warming center. Skeptical residents watched from across the street. Some accused the project of being a scam. Others whispered about government experiments. But a few, especially the younger ones, watched with a kind of wary hope. Emma spent her days on the site, helping where she could, taking photos, answering questions, drinking bad coffee out of styrofoam cups with Nia and her crew. She wasn't above the work. She was part of it now. The moment the prototype went live, there was no dramatic reveal. No lights suddenly blazing. Just a quiet hum and the blinking green of a panel that had once been dark. A heater kicked on. An old refrigerator buzzed. For the first time in years, the building had sustained, independent power. Word spread. People came to see it. A man brought his daughter to plug in her oxygen machine. A woman charged her phone to call a sister in jail. A boy wheeled in a busted laptop and asked if someone could help him fix it. Emma sat on the steps that night, watching the building glow faintly from within. She felt something ancient stir in her chest, like the first time she saw the ocean, or heard her grandfather's radio come back to life. This was what mattered. Not the headlines. Not the clicks. This. 3 days later, the backlash arrived. A man in a pressed suit showed up with 2 others claiming to be from the city utilities department. They demanded to inspect the device. Nia refused. "You had 30 years to inspect this neighborhood," she told them. "You didn't care then. You don't get to care now." The men left with tight smiles, but Emma knew what that meant. That night, someone cut the signal cables. The Novacore shut down. It was sabotage. The building went dark. The heater stopped. The food spoiled. Emma stood in the silent hallway, rage coiled inside her. She didn't sleep. Neither did Nia. By morning, Mark had flown in with backup parts, and Sophia patched into the system remotely to reroute the energy signature. By noon, it was running again. This time, they added cameras. Floodlights. A sensor grid. It became a fortress, not of steel, but of purpose. And people noticed. The crowd doubled. A reporter from a local paper showed up. Then NPR. Then CNN. And soon, Emma was back in front of a camera, not to defend the project, but to bear witness to it. "This is not a PR stunt," she told the interviewer. "This is a community saying, we deserve better. The Nova Core isn't just technology. It's a statement. And no one's going to silence it this time." Her voice cracked at the end, and she didn't care. The clip went viral. Detroit became the flagship site. Donations poured in. And other communities from the 10 began to report similar success. A hospital in rural Uganda kept its lights on through a storm. A school in Bangladesh ran 24-hour tutoring sessions. A family in Ukraine used the Nova Core to charge a medical drone. The world started to see, not just the device, but the people it touched. But with the light came shadow. A coalition of fossil fuel companies announced a lawsuit against Tesla, claiming the Nova Core posed catastrophic infrastructure destabilization risks. They demanded a temporary injunction. They got it. Emma watched the court hearing online from her hotel in Detroit. The judge, weary-eyed and clearly under pressure, granted a 30-day pause on all further distribution outside the 10 sites. The news hit like a gut punch. Musk released a single statement: "We expected this. It only proves we're right." But Emma could feel the shift again. The old world was fighting back harder now. Lawsuits. Threats. Backroom deals. Rumors swirled that governments were being lobbied to ban unlicensed energy sources. That night, Nia handed Emma a folded piece of paper. "You want to know if this matters?" she said. "Read this." It was a handwritten letter from a girl named Tamika, age 12. It said, "Thank you for fixing the church. I used to be cold all the time. Now I'm not. Maybe I can finish my science project now. I want to build something that makes power like you." Emma cried in the stairwell. Not from defeat, but from the overwhelming truth that none of this could be stopped. Because it wasn't about Musk anymore. It wasn't about her. The future didn't need permission. It had already begun. And the people? They were ready to carry it forward, one charged laptop, one warm room, one hopeful child at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom in Washington, D.C. was cold in every way: air, lighting, tone. The Energy Consortium's legal team arrived in tailored suits and thin smiles, their briefcases snapping open like steel traps. Across the aisle sat Tesla's defense, lean and composed but vastly outnumbered. At the center of it all was a single question: could the Nova Core continue operating in public spaces, or would it be forced into indefinite suspension under the guise of regulatory concern? Emma watched from the gallery, press credentials hanging from her neck, her pulse pounding. The judge, an aging man with a reputation for neutrality and an allergy to spectacle, opened with a sigh. "Let's remember, this is a hearing, not a theater. And the stakes are not theoretical. This case has international consequences." On the first day, the consortium led with fear. A parade of expert witnesses painted the Nova Core as untested, unpredictable, and potentially catastrophic to public infrastructure. They argued it could destabilize energy markets, trigger blackouts, collapse utility profits, and unravel grid integrity. "There is no free power," one executive intoned solemnly. "Every what has a cost. The question is who pays it." Musk wasn't in the room. Neither were the engineers. Instead, Tesla sent a thin binder of documentation, a letter from Sophia detailing the Nova Core's performance metrics, and a single-page rebuttal signed by Musk himself: "The future is not dangerous. Refusing to evolve is." On the third day, the judge allowed testimony from the field. That's when it changed. Nia was the first witness. She stood in a simple coat with no makeup, speaking clearly and without theatrics. You want to talk about risk? Risk is being 70 years old and unable to heat your house in February. Risk is having no backup when the grid goes down. This isn't about energy. It's about who gets to decide who suffers. She showed photos, kids doing homework by Novacore light, elders sleeping through the night for the first time in years, community gardens sprouting thanks to 24-hour grow lamps. This device didn't just give us power. It gave us dignity. The gallery murmured. The consortium lawyers objected. The judge allowed it. Then came the international testimonies. A doctor from Bangladesh testified remotely about how Novacore-powered fridges saved vaccines during a monsoon. A mayor from Brazil described how power uptime went from 2 hours a day to 20. One Ukrainian mother, wrapped in a scarf, simply held up her phone and said, "My son is alive because we had light when the rockets came." Emma took notes, but she already knew what she was writing. This was no longer about market disruption. It was a civil rights battle dressed in circuit boards and voltage numbers. The closing arguments came and went. The judge said he would issue a ruling within 2 weeks. But the world didn't wait. Outside the courthouse, crowds had formed, first hundreds, then thousands. People held handmade signs, "Let US have light, the future is now, I am Novacore." Emma waded through the crowd with her press badge pressed to her chest, capturing photos of grandmothers chanting beside coders, school kids with cardboard cutouts of the device, veterans in wheelchairs holding solar panels aloft like shields. Something was happening that no one could have scripted. The invention had sparked a movement. By the end of the week, more than 30 cities held solidarity demonstrations. Novacore users across the 10 sites posted videos of their installations working perfectly, no accidents, no overloads, no failures. Just quiet, clean energy. The hashtag power to the people trended for 10 straight days. Then came the turning point. A leaked memo surfaced from inside the consortium. It was a private strategy document labeled Energy Defense Phase 3. The contents were explosive. Line items detailed lobbying payments to key senators, plans to spread disinformation about Novacore, radiation exposure, and even the hiring of private firms to stage sabotage operations to frame Tesla as negligent. Emma's inbox exploded. Anonymous sources confirmed the document's authenticity. She published the full memo with supporting evidence on a neutral open-source platform, along with an op-ed titled "They Lied Because They're Losing." The public outcry was immediate and ferocious. Investigations were launched. CEOs were subpoenaed. Share prices for major oil and gas companies dipped hard. Several resigned. On the evening news, anchors who once dismissed the Novacore now struggled to explain why their sponsors had been funding attacks on a technology that, by all visible metrics, was working. But the fight wasn't over. 2 nights after the leak, Emma received a call from Mark. "Detroit's down," he said. It was an EMP, targeted. "The sensor grid's fried. Looks like military grade." Emma felt the air leave her lungs. "Anyone hurt?" "No," he said, but his voice was strained. "The core is intact, but we need to replace the perimeter." It was deliberate, Emma. Not a protest. Not vandalism. This was a warning. She flew back that night. The building was dark when she arrived, but Nia was there, sweeping broken glass with a broom and a set jaw. "They don't scare us," she said simply. "We've been surviving worse since before they were born." Emma helped rebuild. So did half the block. People brought extension cords, flashlights, tools. Someone patched the wiring with parts from a broken washing machine. By dawn, the core was humming again. And this time, they didn't bother hiding it. They broadcast the reboot live. The footage went viral in hours, a quiet room lit from within while a crowd clapped and wept outside. It was humanity, unfiltered. Raw. Radiant. In the background, Emma stood near the doorway, watching it all. Her face was tired, her clothes smudged with dust, but her eyes glowed. The same day, the judge issued his ruling. The injunction was lifted. Effective immediately, Novacore could proceed with limited release and protected pilot programs. The decision cited unprecedented public benefit, absence of systemic failure, and lack of legal basis for industrial monopolies to dictate citizen access to decentralized energy. It was a legal breakthrough. A philosophical one. Tesla responded with a short message, "Let's build." But Musk also made a decision that surprised everyone. He announced that the Novacore's base design would be made open source. Anyone could build one. Modify it. Improve it. Share it. Not for sale. Not for license. For life. Within a week, engineers around the world were replicating the device. A maker group in India built a working Novacore from scrap within 6 days. A Vietnamese high school modified the battery array for use in rural rice fields. A refugee in Jordan coded a self-regulating grid system in Python to balance 3 units across a camp with over 5,000 people. Emma wrote about all of it. Her articles were now translated into 38 languages. She turned down offers from every major network. She didn't want a TV show. She wanted the truth. One afternoon, back in Detroit, she walked to the old church and found Tamika, the 12-year-old girl from the letter, sitting at a desk with a laptop, sketching something. "What's that?" Emma asked. The girl looked up. "A smaller version of the core. For single houses. I think I can get it under $100 if I use old phone batteries." Emma blinked, stunned. "That's amazing." "Yeah," Tamika said casually, flipping her notebook. "I want to make one for Miss Nia's house. She says her heater still goes out sometimes." Emma felt something deep inside her shift. Not pride. Not amazement. Something more profound. The moment when a dream, passed hand to hand, stops being a dream, and becomes a birthright. That night, Emma sat on her hotel balcony, watching the skyline flicker with new lights that didn't belong to the grid. Stars above. Lights below. And between them, people. Fighting. Building. Believing. She opened her notebook and wrote one line at the top of a new page: "They tried to stop the future, and we built it anyway." It started like a wave. 1 Novacore in Detroit. Then 10 more in remote places around the world. Then 1,000. Then, in the span of just 5 weeks, more than 50,000 open-source cores were registered across the globe, some built in labs, others in sheds, some in refugee camps and city apartments, and even in prison yards, where inmates worked with donated schematics and jury-rigged tools to light their common areas. It was no longer an invention. It was a movement. Whole towns began detaching from centralized power systems. A fishing village in Indonesia ran entirely on community-built Novacores. A monastery in the Alps sent a video message: "We haven't paid an electric bill in 2 months. God bless whoever built this thing." But the most stunning moment came when, during a late-night UN emergency session on energy equity, a delegate from Kenya announced that over 200 rural schools had already integrated Novacores, and that students' test scores were rising. "Not because they're smarter," she said, "but because they can see at night." The chamber went silent. Then it erupted in applause. Emma watched all of it from a small desk in what had once been a utility closet inside Tesla's temporary media operations center. She had turned down a corner office to be closer to the team, where the servers hummed and coffee never stayed warm for long. Her fingers flew across the keys, documenting everything: stories, stats, backlash, breakthroughs. She wasn't writing just for a newspaper anymore. She was writing history. Mark had transitioned fully into field support, traveling from one site to the next, helping community engineers build smarter, faster. He sent her video messages at odd hours, from Cairo rooftops, Chilean deserts, Arctic research stations. Always the same grin, the same dirty jacket. Still running. Still glowing, he'd say. Then sign off with a two-finger salute. Sophia had become something of a myth, speaking at summits, consulted by world leaders, rarely seen in person. But every few days, she sent Emma a voice memo. "We're tweaking the charge regulators. You'd be proud." Tamika helped with the math. Meanwhile, the opposition was unraveling. The Energy Consortium's credibility tanked after the leak. A class action lawsuit had formed in Detroit, targeting those who attempted to sabotage the prototype. Investigators linked shell companies to major utility players, and indictments followed. Emma didn't cheer. She simply wrote. Truth had its own rhythm now. But the political side remained volatile. Countries split into two camps, those embracing the Novacore revolution and those trying to suppress it. The lines didn't always fall along wealth or power. Iceland and Nepal joined a shared energy agreement within weeks. France and Mexico began national production initiatives. But China, the UK, and several Middle Eastern nations imposed bans, citing national energy sovereignty. In the US, states fractured along predictable ideological lines. California announced a full integration plan, offering Novacore subsidies and support. Texas criminalized unlicensed use within city limits. Emma flew back to New York to cover a special session of Congress convened to address what one lawmaker called the biggest disruption since the Internet. The hearing was chaos. Tech moguls warned of economic collapse. Governors begged for federal guidance. Activists stormed the Capitol steps chanting, "We built IT, you can't break it." And in the center of it all, Emma stood behind a podium, not as a reporter, but as an invited witness. Her voice shook slightly as she began. 5 years ago, I lost my job for telling the truth. This year, I found it again by writing about the light. She told them about Detroit. About Bangladesh. About Tamika. This isn't about infrastructure. It's about injustice. Novacore doesn't threaten America, it reminds us what we forgot. That freedom includes the right to power. To heat. To safety. You can't legislate that out of existence. When she stepped down, there was a pause. Then a congresswoman from New Mexico rose and said, "I move that this testimony be entered into the record as evidence of public necessity." The motion passed. Emma exhaled. On her way out, an intern stopped her with wide eyes. "Miss Carter, can I take a photo with you? My brother built a Novacore in our garage." Emma smiled. "Make sure he patents it first. Or not. Just, keep building." The photo went viral. She didn't even know it had been posted. That weekend, something unexpected happened. A global coalition of former engineers, inventors, and retired scientists released a public declaration of support for Novacore technology. They called it the Second Enlightenment Manifesto. It read, in part, "For centuries, innovation was controlled by profit. We say, no more. Let invention belong to everyone." Emma included the full text in her next article. Then shut her laptop and cried. Not from sadness. From release. Because it was working. It was really working. But with light came shadow. A small Novacore plant in Uganda was destroyed by arson. A shipment of materials to Bolivia was seized by a rogue paramilitary group. Emma's inbox flooded with messages from desperate builders asking how to protect themselves. Is there a blueprint for defense? They asked. She didn't have one. That night, she met with Musk. It was only the second time they'd spoken since the project began. He was barefoot, eating almonds from a jar, staring at a wall of screens showing live core feeds from around the world. They're trying to control the rollout, she said. Some of them are trying to destroy it. Of course, he replied. Revolutions are messy. It's not about avoiding chaos. It's about outlasting it. She frowned. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be, he said, turning toward her. It's the truth. They were silent a moment. Then Musk said something she would never forget. Do you know what the hardest part of invention is, Emma? What? Letting go of it. She understood. The Novacore had transcended its creators. It was no longer his invention. Or Tesla's. Or anyone's. It belonged to people now. To the girl building a model with phone batteries. To the man who used it to charge a defibrillator. To the mother who boiled water for the first time without chopping wood. Then what do we do now? She asked. Musk smiled faintly. We don't lead anymore. We follow. Find the ones who are doing the impossible with it. Shine the light on them. She left the meeting with her next mission. Not to write stories about the technology, but about the people building their own futures. She called it the Bright Line series. Every week, she published a profile, a farmer in Zimbabwe who turned the core into a water purifier. A teacher in Syria who used it to build a solar-powered library. A young coder in Detroit, Tamika, who launched her first software patch to make the interface more kid-friendly. The series exploded. Media outlets picked it up. Universities began teaching Novacore open design principles. And slowly, the world adjusted. Energy giants rebranded. Some began offering Novacore-compatible tools. Cities wrote new codes. Black markets formed, but so did co-ops. A new kind of energy economy emerged, one that wasn't measured just in watts or dollars, but in access. In dignity. In hope. Emma's own life transformed. She no longer needed a title to do her work. She wasn't just a journalist or an activist or even a witness. She was a bridge. A voice. A spark. One night, she received a message from Mark. A photo. Him, sitting under a tree in Ghana beside a group of kids, all of them bathed in Novacore light, reading comic books. His text read, "We lit the world." Quietly. Like it always should have been. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she closed her eyes and remembered her grandfather's kitchen, the sound of an old radio humming back to life. And she thought, maybe this is what he meant all along. Not just to fix things. But to keep the light going, long after we're gone. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It was a message, simple, untagged, buried among thousands in Emma's public inbox. The subject line read, "They're not going to stop with sabotage." The message had no signature. Just one paragraph, "They can't discredit the technology, so they're going after the people. Watch your team. Trust no systems." Emma stared at it for a while before forwarding it to Tesla Security. Their reply was polite but cautious. "We'll escalate the flag." Likely a hoax. But something about the tone stuck with her. A week later, Mark missed a scheduled video call. Then two. When she finally got through, his voice was tight. "I'm okay, but someone's following me. I had to change hotels. Could be nothing, but I don't think it is." He was in Argentina, overseeing a Novacore cluster on the outskirts of Buenos Aires. He'd been mentoring a local engineering group, young, bright kids with a passion for repurposed tech. "They're amazing," he'd said in his last message. One of them hacked a garden sensor to self-adjust the power output based on humidity. Now, he was moving quietly, staying off-grid. "I don't want to scare them," he told Emma. "But something's changed. This isn't about lawsuits anymore. This feels military." The same day, Sophia sent a private message, encrypted, time-stamped, brief. "I'm moving operations. Too many eyes. They've embedded observers in local agencies. I'll be dark for a while. Keep publishing. Keep them honest. Emma sat in the Tesla command hub, the lights buzzing faintly overhead, feeling like the world was shifting beneath her again, but this time, it wasn't just disruption. It was a campaign. Someone out there had realized that the Novacore wasn't just technology. It was power redistribution on a global scale. And those who built their empires on control weren't going to surrender it without a final war. That night, Emma walked the city streets alone, just to breathe. Just to think. She passed a small bodega with a handmade sign, "We powered by Novacore." "Thank you, Elon." Inside, the cashier was humming along to an old jazz song, the lights warm and constant. She smiled, but the smile didn't last. She felt the weight again. The cost. Back in her hotel, she opened a drawer and pulled out the letter Tamika had given her months ago. "I want to build something that makes power like you," it read. She folded it back, then wrote a message to the girl's mother, "Can I bring her to speak at the summit?" The Global Energy Transition Summit was set for October, hosted in Geneva. Delegates from 90 countries were attending. It had started as a formality, but in the wake of the Novacore movement, it had transformed into a battlefield of ideas. The final day would be open to public speakers. Emma had been asked to keynote. She hadn't decided. But now, she knew exactly what she needed to do. She wasn't the story anymore. The story belonged to those who carried it forward. She booked 2 tickets. Tamika said yes. The days leading up to the summit were tense. 2 Novacore hubs in Eastern Europe were vandalized. One in Malaysia was seized under a new national grid protection law. A draft bill circulated in the U.S. Senate proposing a Mandatory Energy Registration Act that would classify independent energy systems as potential national threats. "It's about control," Nia told Emma over the phone. "Not safety. They're afraid." We finally unplugged their leash. Still, the summit went ahead. And on the morning of her flight, Emma received a package. No return address. Inside was a burner phone. One number pre-programmed. A text already blinking, "Don't speak in Geneva. You've been warned." She stared at it for a long moment, then snapped the phone in 2 and dropped it in the trash. Geneva was overcast when they landed. Tamika, now 13, wore a navy blazer and carried a folder of notes. She was calm, focused, her eyes scanning the crowd at the airport like a young diplomat. "I think I'm more nervous about tripping on stage than anything else," she said. Emma laughed. "Just don't fall on the UN Secretary General. That's where we draw the line." Security was heavy at the venue. Delegates passed through 6 checkpoints. Tesla had its own suite, tightly guarded. Musk was expected to appear by video, not in person. Sophia was still dark. Mark had managed a secure message, watching from afar. "You've got this." The summit was already buzzing when they arrived. Protests outside, debates inside. On stage, economists clashed with environmentalists. Energy ministers warned of mass layoffs, while humanitarian leaders countered with data showing dramatic poverty reduction in Novacore adopting zones. By the time Emma stepped on stage, the auditorium was thick with tension. She took a breath, then stepped back. "Before I speak," she said, "I want you to hear from someone who embodies the future we're all here to discuss." She gestured. Tamika stepped forward. She didn't look scared. She looked ready. "My name is Tamika Jones," she began. "I'm from Detroit. I used to do my homework in the dark. Then the Novacore came. And then I built one. Not because I'm a genius. But because someone gave me a chance. And now, I help my neighbors build them too." She held up her notebook. "This is a blueprint I made for a mini-core that costs less than $50 to build. I used phone batteries and parts from a fan. I don't want to sell it. I just want every kid who needs power to have it. That's all. The room was silent. Cameras flashed. Then a slow, rising applause. Emma stepped up beside her. You've heard from the lobbyists. The CEOs. The ministers. But listen closely, you've also just heard from the future. And it doesn't need your permission. When they left the stage, 3 delegates requested copies of Tamika's blueprint. One ambassador from Iceland handed her a business card. We'd like you to speak to our youth council, he said. Tamika just nodded and tucked it into her folder. Emma received another anonymous message that night. This time, it was a video, grainy footage of a military briefing, voice distorted. We've identified civilian nodes coordinating unauthorized power clusters. Strategy is to disrupt coordination, discredit leadership, and retake the narrative. She forwarded it to Tesla. Musk's reply was cryptic, they always panic before they fall. But Emma couldn't ignore the sense of unease building again. The game had shifted once more. The enemy wasn't just utilities or politicians. It was something deeper, institutions built on the assumption that power, literal and figurative, belonged to the few. Now that assumption was crumbling. And those clinging to it were becoming dangerous. On the flight home, Emma stared out the window at a planet filled with flickers of hope and threats. She knew the movement had passed the point of no return. But revolutions didn't just need technology. They needed protection. They needed resilience. She opened her notebook and wrote one word, Guardians. A network. A decentralized coalition. Builders, coders, writers, teachers, engineers. One in every country, each trained to defend, teach, and replicate Novacore tech no matter what laws were passed or systems attacked. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. When they landed, she called Mark. We're building something new, she said. Not just energy. Resistance. His voice lit up. Finally. I thought you'd never ask. Within a week, she and a small team had launched the Bright Network. Open source. Volunteer-led. Built not just to spread Novacore, but to protect its users. They didn't fight with weapons. They fought with code, with public awareness, with connection. Their motto, keep the light on. It spread like wildfire. Engineers in Brazil set up encrypted backup cores. Teachers in India built school kits. A hacker in Poland created a Novacore firewall to block malicious shutdown attempts. Tamika ran the youth wing, now dubbed Spark. She wrote the welcome packet herself. This isn't just tech, it said. It's the power to dream with the lights on. Emma worked non-stop, fueled by coffee, belief, and a strange kind of peace. Because for the first time, she wasn't reacting. She was building. And when another threat message came, a vague warning of intervention, she didn't flinch. She went live. Publicly. In front of a camera. To those trying to shut this down, you're too late. The world saw what's possible. We won't go back to darkness. It became the most watched video of the year. And somewhere out there, someone in a control room marked her name in red. But Emma Carter didn't care. She had already chosen her side. And it glowed. It started at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Across 6 continents, Novacore units began to flicker, not off, but irregularly. Pulses, distortions, sudden shutdowns followed by rapid restarts. At first, users thought it was a glitch, a firmware error, or maybe local interference. But when reports from South Korea, Brazil, Nigeria, and Turkey all came in within the same minute, it became clear, this was not a malfunction. It was an attack. Emma was asleep when her phone erupted. Notifications, alerts, code pings from the Bright Network's global monitors, and a red flag message from Tamika, core signal scrambled. appears deliberate. Confirming. Emma sprang up, throwing on her hoodie, heart pounding. She activated the emergency server terminal from her hotel room and joined the live feed. Dozens of faces filled the screen, bright network engineers, volunteers, translators, security analysts. A chaos of voices. Signal distortion detected in 74% of open-source cores. We're seeing a script that rewrites the input-output recognition logic. It's not damaging hardware, just paralyzing the loop. It's coordinated. Someone built a worm that crawls across local mesh networks. It's jumping from device to device. We've got 5 countries dark in under 20 minutes. Emma took a deep breath, leaned forward, and said, "Lock down replication nodes. Isolate anything that hasn't been compromised. Get the patches offline. We do this the old way." For months, the Bright network had operated like an ecosystem, distributed, agile, peer-to-peer. But that same strength had become a weakness. The attacker, or attackers, had studied the system. They knew the devices weren't centrally monitored. They used that openness to inject a single, elegant line of code, not to destroy, but to disable. In response, Bright engineers split into cells. Operation Candlelight, Tamika named it, after a story her grandmother used to tell her about surviving blackouts during a storm. Each node would become its own beacon, cut off from the main web, but individually secured and powered. Manual resets. Local defense protocols. A digital triage. Emma coordinated from the Tesla Command Hub, where 3 senior engineers were already rewriting firmware under red emergency lighting. One of them, a 26-year-old from Romania named Leo, had been on shift for 18 hours. "We can build a hotfix," he said, "but if they've breached the mesh registry, they can still send future payloads. We need to find the origin." And that's when something shifted. A quiet voice over the intercom. "Sophia. I've traced the worm," she said, voice grainy but clear. It originated from a private facility in the Nevada desert. Military-grade encryption. Masked as a network handshake. The room fell still. "Government?" Emma asked. Sophia was quiet for a second. "No. Private defense contractor. Operating under former contracts. Off the books now. But not gone." A moment later, a second message appeared in Emma's inbox. Anonymous. Encrypted. "You built a future without us. This is your final warning. We built the wires, and we can cut them." It was signed only, "The Architects." She recognized the term. The architects were whispered about in back channels, former intelligence analysts, military-adjacent hackers, deep network operators with no allegiance to nation or law, only to maintaining control. They didn't care about energy. They cared about the principle that no system could exist unless they could see it. Control it. Kill it. Emma looked around the command room. People were exhausted. But they weren't broken. "Then let's show them what happens when people don't ask for permission anymore," she said. They worked through the night. Code was rebuilt in real time. Volunteers in Australia stayed online through dawn, pushing firmware patches to rural communities. A hacker from Kenya, only 16 years old, isolated the heartbeat of the worm and created a mirror loop to confuse its targeting algorithm. "I don't need sleep," he messaged. "I need this to work." In 12 hours, more than 80% of compromised cores had been restored. Not centrally, but one by one. Manually. By hands that refused to give up. By midnight, the worm was dead. Not because it had been defeated at once, but because it had been outlived by resilience. Bright network nodes celebrated quietly. There were no press conferences. Just lights flickering back on in the middle of the night in places no one ever thought would have power. And in the aftermath, Emma wrote one line in her article: "You can't shut down what's already alive in the hands of the people." But the attack had left its mark. Trust had been shaken. The open-source nature of the Nova Core, once its greatest strength, now looked like a vulnerability to some. In response, major governments called for a new, global energy governance treaty to ensure security and uniformity. Musk refused to endorse it. So did Tesla. Sophia issued a rare public statement: the future should be protected by communities, not committees. Emma agreed. But she also saw the next challenge forming on the horizon. It wasn't about tech anymore. It was about fear. Fear being used to justify control. In that climate, the next move would be legislative. Predictable. Slow. And potentially devastating. Within days, 6 countries introduced new bills requiring registration of all Nova Core devices under state authority. In the U.S., one senator called for a pause on all unlicensed civilian power generation. Emma went to D.C. to testify again. But this time, she didn't bring statistics. She brought people. Tamika. Nia. The teacher from Syria. The farmer from Zimbabwe. Each told their story. Not just about power, but about independence. About how the core hadn't just given them electricity, it had made them part of something bigger. A global breadth of possibility. "We are not dangerous," said the Syrian teacher, softly. "We are just finally visible." The vote failed. Barely. But Emma knew they had only bought time. She met with Musk in person the next day. He was standing on a construction platform above a new Tesla solar wing. "We have to think bigger," he said. "Faster. Get ahead of them." "How?" Emma asked. "They'll keep coming. Now with laws." Musk looked out at the desert horizon. "Then we build something they can't legislate. A system so distributed, so self-sustaining, that even if they take down one part, the rest thrives." He paused. "Think of it like this. The internet gave us freedom of information. Nova Core gave us freedom of power. The next step is freedom of infrastructure." She understood. A leap beyond energy. Toward self-sustaining communities. Autonomous, off-grid, unbreakable. Nova City. The name hadn't been chosen yet. But the vision was already forming: decentralized systems for water, food, communication, education, all powered by open technology and governed by local trust, not external force. It would begin as a prototype. A real place. A living idea. Emma agreed to lead the media rollout. "It's not a product," she wrote in the first announcement. "It's a promise." The world reacted with curiosity and skepticism. But people were listening. And this time, they weren't just asking if it would work. They were asking where to sign up. As Emma boarded the plane back to Detroit, a small girl across the aisle stared at her, then whispered to her mother, "That's the light lady." Emma smiled. She didn't correct her. Because in a world where power once meant control, maybe being the light lady wasn't such a bad thing after all. The idea was simple but staggering: a self-sustaining city powered entirely by open-source technology, independent from traditional grids, built to be a prototype for a new world. Emma stood on the barren plot outside Detroit, the autumn wind biting at her jacket as she surveyed the dusty, uneven ground. Here, they would build Nova City, a place where energy, water, food, education, and communication all flowed from decentralized, community-driven technology. The Tesla team had worked feverishly for weeks, shipping in modular units, solar arrays, battery banks, water recyclers, and hydroponic gardens. Contractors arrived with blueprints for living pods and schools, fiber optic cables would thread beneath the earth, and satellite links would beam signals across the region. But the weight of scrutiny was heavier than any shipping container. Cameras and drones circled overhead, reporters from major networks, government officials, and corporate lobbyists watched every move. A banner hung from the construction fence: "Nova City, power to the people, by the people." Emma felt the hope and the pressure in equal measure. As the appointed director of community relations, she had to be the bridge, between vision and reality, between excitement and skepticism. The morning's meeting convened under a large tent. Elon Musk was present via video, calm but electrifying as ever. "We're not just building structures," he said. "We're building trust. Nova City has to prove the impossible is possible, a future without centralized power grids or control." He clicked through slides showing early designs, modular homes that could be expanded or downsized, a grid of microgenerators powered by sunlight, wind, and kinetic energy harvested from residents' movement. But the real breakthrough is governance. No mayor, no utilities board. This will be a community-run ecosystem, managed by open protocols and local consensus. Emma nodded. "We'll begin with 150 volunteers," she said. "People from across the country who believe in this. Families, teachers, engineers, activists. They'll build, live, and test the systems. The whole world will watch." The first arrivals trickled in over the next few days. Among them was Daniel Rivera, a former firefighter from Phoenix who wanted a second chance after losing his home in wildfires. There was Mia Chen, a tech blogger from San Francisco who had been following the NovaCore movement since the beginning. And Tamika, now 15, a symbol of youth leadership and future possibility. Emma greeted each newcomer personally, feeling the mixture of excitement and anxiety in their eyes. For many, this was more than a project. It was a lifeline. The days blurred into a whirlwind of setup, testing, and troubleshooting. The solar arrays went up, but a freak storm knocked out power to half the site the first week. The water recycling units leaked and had to be recalibrated. Mia's blog posts chronicled every victory and failure with unfiltered honesty, helping build global interest but also inviting sharp criticism from skeptics. "This is pie in the sky," one editorial claimed. "Dangerous and unrealistic." Emma didn't respond publicly but felt the sting. The corporate-backed media pushed narratives about unregulated energy risks and unsanctioned tech. One evening, as the wind howled outside a communal dining pod, Daniel shared his fears over dinner. "What if they shut us down? What if it's all just an experiment that ends with us powerless and abandoned?" Emma looked at him, tired but steady. "We're not alone," she said. "The Bright Network is watching. And this city is just the beginning." Meanwhile, engineers were racing to finalize the governance system. It was called the Nexus Protocol, a decentralized digital platform where every resident had a vote, data transparency, and the ability to propose changes. The platform would automatically regulate resource distribution based on real-time needs and consensus. It was unlike anything in existence. The first town hall meeting was chaotic and inspiring. People debated how to allocate water during drought risk. Mia pushed for open forums. Daniel raised concerns about emergency response readiness. Tamika proposed educational programs to teach children about sustainability. Emma facilitated, smoothing tensions and encouraging collaboration. But beneath the surface, opposition simmered. A coalition of utility companies and government agencies launched a coordinated campaign to undermine Nova City. Letters arrived threatening legal action over zoning, safety, and environmental compliance. Surveillance drones circled the site with increasing frequency. Anonymous hacking attempts targeted the Nexus Protocol's codebase, attempting to sow mistrust. Emma convened an emergency team to handle the crisis. She reached out to Nia and Sophia for cybersecurity advice. They recommended advanced encryption layers, active threat detection, and community alerts. The situation was evolving rapidly, but the team held fast. In the background, Elon Musk offered strategic guidance, emphasizing public transparency and resilience. "People need to see we're solving problems openly, not hiding failures," he advised. Over time, the resistance became a paradoxical boost. The more Nova City faced scrutiny and attacks, the more people rallied behind it. Mia's blog exploded with reader comments from around the world. Volunteers signed up to help build replica communities. The concept of independent, community-run cities captured imaginations beyond energy debates. It became a symbol of empowerment and resistance. Emma found herself standing before a crowd at a pop-up event near the city's edge, addressing reporters and curious locals. "Nova City isn't just about technology," she said. "It's about reclaiming control over our lives. When power belongs to the people, we build something stronger than any corporation or government." The applause was genuine, but Emma knew the road ahead would be harder still. Months passed, and the city began to take shape. Homes rose from the ground, gardens flourished, and kids laughed in schools powered by solar walls. Nova City wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Residents learned to live with the rhythm of decentralized energy, sharing resources, adapting to fluctuations, trusting one another. Emma often visited the communal square in the evenings, watching Tamika teach younger children about energy cycles and sustainability. The girl's passion was infectious, a reminder that this movement was more than a technology, it was a legacy. Yet, even in these moments of hope, Emma never forgot the warnings. The architects hadn't gone away. The attacks had paused, but the threat lingered, growing quiet and calculated. A new bill was under discussion in Congress, one that would classify Nova City's infrastructure as a national security risk and authorize federal intervention. When Emma heard this, she knew the battle wasn't over. That night, she sat at her desk, the city's lights glowing faintly through her window, and wrote a message to the bright network: "We've built a city. Now, we build a movement." She signed it simply, Emma Carter. The Light Lady. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Nova City was no longer just an experiment. It was a declaration. A promise that the age of centralized power was ending, and a new era was just beginning. The hearing room in the Capitol building was colder than Emma expected. The marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, but the atmosphere was heavy, tense with the kind of judgment reserved for battles bigger than one person or one city. Emma adjusted her blazer, felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, and took a deep breath. She wasn't just representing Nova City anymore, she was standing for a vision of freedom in a world choking on control. The Senate committee was packed. Government officials, lobbyists from energy conglomerates, media cameras, and advocates crowded the benches. The bill labeled the National Infrastructure Protection Act was being debated, a law that, if passed, would allow federal authorities to seize control of decentralized energy systems like Nova City, citing security risks. Emma's voice was steady as she stepped to the podium. Nova City is not a threat. It is a solution. She outlined how the city operated, the transparency built into its systems, the thousands of people it empowered. "We are not anarchists. We are collaborators." The opposition didn't wait. Senator Cole, a hawkish figure with deep ties to traditional utilities, fired back. "Ms. Carter, you present a utopian ideal, but the reality is dangerous. Without oversight, these rogue energy systems could be manipulated by hostile actors, threatening national security." Emma nodded. "That's why we built Nexus Protocol, to ensure accountability through technology, not bureaucracy. We welcome oversight, but not control." Questions followed, heated and probing. At times, Emma felt like she was walking a tightrope. After hours, she was exhausted but proud. She'd spoken her truth, challenged assumptions, and shown that Nova City was more than a political stunt. Backstage, her team greeted her with quiet smiles. Mia was live-streaming the hearing's highlights, while Daniel shared messages from volunteers offering support. But the political battle was far from over. The next day, news broke that major utility companies had launched an aggressive PR campaign painting Nova City as a reckless experiment that could endanger public safety. Headlines blared warnings of blackouts, fire hazards, and economic chaos. Emma's phone buzzed non-stop with anxious messages. Meanwhile, a mysterious group calling themselves the Guardians appeared on social media, vigilantes claiming to protect the integrity of the nation's power grid. They released leaked documents alleging that Nova City's systems had backdoors exploitable by foreign hackers. Emma knew these claims were false. But in the court of public opinion, fear often drowned facts. She convened a crisis meeting with Musk and the core Bright Network engineers. "We need transparency," Musk insisted. "Open the codebase for independent audits. Let them see everything." Sophia, the cybersecurity lead, agreed. "If we don't, the narrative controls the story." Emma arranged for a live, global audit demonstration, allowing independent experts to review Nexus protocol and Nova City's infrastructure in real time. The event attracted thousands online. For hours, analysts dissected code, network security, and governance mechanisms. Their conclusion was unanimous: Nova City's systems were secure, innovative, and resilient. The Guardian's claims were debunked. The tide began to shift. Public support grew as people realized that Nova City wasn't a threat, it was a beacon of hope. But the political environment remained hostile. The Senate committee's vote was delayed as lobbyists and legal experts maneuvered behind closed doors. Emma's team scrambled to build alliances. They reached out to environmental groups, civil liberties organizations, and local governments sympathetic to decentralized energy. One surprising ally emerged in Congresswoman Rebecca Lane, a veteran legislator from Oregon known for her fierce independence. Lane visited Nova City, walking its solar-powered streets, meeting residents, and witnessing the community in action. "This isn't just technology," Lane told Emma in a private meeting. "It's democracy in motion." With Lane's endorsement, Emma gained a powerful voice on Capitol Hill willing to challenge the utilities and bureaucrats. Yet, not everyone was pleased. A shadowy figure known only as the architect resurfaced, leaking a threatening message to the press: "You may rally the people, but the system cannot be undone." The message was chilling but vague enough to sow fear without specifics. Emma refused to be intimidated. "We build light in the darkness," she told her team. "They can't stop the dawn." As spring turned to summer, the legislative battle intensified. Lobbyists flooded committees with studies warning of energy instability. Opponents demanded invasive inspections and licensing fees that would cripple Nova City's open model. Emma countered by organizing a coalition of tech innovators and citizen groups. They launched a national petition, coordinated town halls, and flooded social media with testimonials. Daniel Rivera became a vocal spokesperson, sharing how Nova City had transformed his life after losing everything. Mia's blog turned into a platform for stories from residents across the country who had found new hope through decentralized energy. The movement was growing beyond a city, it was becoming a movement of people demanding change. The Senate finally scheduled a decisive vote. Emma and Lane prepared for a final push, rallying supporters and preparing to face down entrenched powers. The hearing was live-streamed globally. As Emma took the stand again, she looked out over the crowd, then to the camera. "This isn't just about energy," she said. "It's about who we are as a society. Will we choose control and fear? Or trust and innovation?" Nova City is a testament to what people can build when given the chance. We are not a risk. We are the future. The room was silent as the senators deliberated. When the vote was called, the bill failed, by a slim margin. The opposition vowed to return with new strategies. Emma exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. But this victory was only temporary. That night, as she reviewed messages from supporters, her phone buzzed with an alert: a coordinated cyber attack targeted Nova City's satellite communications, threatening to cut off its internet link. The fight wasn't over. It was evolving. And Emma knew that every victory came with a new challenge. But for the first time, she felt a real sense of hope. Because Nova City was no longer just a place. It was a movement. And movements, once ignited, were hard to extinguish. The cyber attack struck just after midnight. Emma was at her desk reviewing the day's progress when an alert flashed on her screen. Intrusion detected in satellite communication network. Multiple breaches in firewall defenses. Heart pounding, she immediately called Sophia, the cybersecurity lead. Sophia's voice was calm but firm over the encrypted line. "They're hitting our uplink hard, trying to cut off internet access to the city. If they succeed, Nova City's residents could lose communications, resource management, everything." Emma clenched her fists. This was more than sabotage. It was an assault on the entire vision. Within minutes, the Bright Network's emergency response team assembled in the command center, a converted shipping container wired with screens, servers, and high-speed connections. Mia was live-streaming the tense moments, narrating to thousands watching worldwide. "Tonight, Nova City faces a critical test," she said. "Can a community powered by openness withstand the darkest hour?" Sophia and her engineers worked furiously, activating backup servers, rerouting data through decentralized nodes, and isolating infected systems. The Nexus protocol was designed with redundancy and self-healing architecture, but the attack scale was unprecedented. Meanwhile, Emma coordinated with Daniel and other residents to maintain calm. The city's communal alert system broadcasted reassurances. "Stay indoors, conserve energy, trust the system," Daniel's voice echoed across speakers. Tamika helped organize educational workshops, turning fear into opportunity by teaching kids how the technology worked. Outside the command center, Emma felt the pulse of Nova City, quiet, determined, people helping one another, neighbors sharing generators and food supplies. This was no longer just a technical project. It was a living experiment in resilience. Hours passed. The attack slowed but did not cease. The team detected patterns. This was a coordinated effort, likely by the same interests that had fought Nova City's political rise. But every attempt to isolate or disable the network was met with swift countermeasures from Sophia's team and the city's self-repairing systems. By dawn, the city's internet flickered back online, the satellite link restored, and communications returned. Exhausted but elated, Emma stepped outside the command center. The sky was a soft pink, and in the streets, people were already emerging. Smiling, hugging, sharing stories of how they'd supported each other. Mia's live stream captured the moment. "Nova City stood strong," she said. "Not because of technology alone, but because of the people." International news outlets picked up the story. Headlines praised Nova City as a symbol of hope against shadowy forces trying to maintain the status quo. Social media exploded with hashtags like #NovaCityStrong and #PowerToThePeople. Global communities reached out, activists in Berlin, engineers in Tokyo, students in Rio, offering solidarity and expertise. Emma realized the battle had shifted. No longer just a local project, Nova City was inspiring a worldwide movement for decentralized, community-driven technology. Over the next weeks, Emma and the team engaged in virtual conferences with international delegations eager to replicate the model. There were offers of funding, invitations to speak at global summits, and proposals to create sister cities across continents. But the increased visibility also attracted new threats. Anonymous messages warned of next moves and greater consequences. Emma knew this meant the architects and their allies were planning their next strike. Yet, the city kept building, growing, thriving. The hydroponic farms expanded, producing fresh food year-round. Education programs flourished, blending technology with sustainability. New residents arrived, drawn by the vision and resilience. Emma found herself reflecting on how far they'd come, from a fragile prototype to a beacon of innovation and hope. She met with Elon Musk via video call, sharing the victory and the challenges ahead. "This is bigger than any of us imagined," he said. "The fight for decentralized power is a fight for freedom." Emma nodded. "And it's just beginning." She looked out her office window at the city's softly glowing lights, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Nova City was no longer just a place, it was a symbol. A challenge to old systems. A promise that a better future was possible when people took power into their own hands. And Emma Carter was ready to lead the way. The world was watching. Nova City's victory over the cyber attack and political challenges had ignited a spark that spread across continents like wildfire. Emma sat in a bright conference room at Tesla's Innovation Hub, surrounded by blueprints, digital maps, and a swarm of engineers and planners from around the globe. On the large screen, satellite images of cities in Brazil, Germany, Kenya, and South Korea flickered, each one a proposed site for a new decentralized community modeled on Nova City's blueprint. Representatives from each country were joining the call, their voices echoing with excitement and cautious optimism. Emma smiled as she listened to them describe their plans, tailoring the Nova City model to local climates, cultures, and resources. In Brazil, the focus was on restoring rainforest land with sustainable energy and agriculture. In Germany, a former industrial town was transforming into a tech-driven green hub. Kenya's coastal communities aimed to use solar power and desalination to create self-sufficient villages. South Korea wanted to integrate cutting-edge AI with decentralized governance to address urban challenges. The future is here, Emma said, her voice steady but infused with hope. We're proving that people don't have to wait for distant authorities to solve their problems. They can build the future themselves, one community at a time. The project was named Nova World, a global network of interconnected cities sharing technology, knowledge, and governance protocols. Tesla provided the open-source tech, but each city was locally run, adapting to its unique needs. The movement attracted not just engineers and activists but artists, educators, and entrepreneurs eager to reimagine what community meant in the 21st century. Mia Chen's blog expanded into a global media platform, showcasing stories from Nova World cities, the families planting gardens, the students coding Nexus protocol apps, the elders teaching traditional crafts alongside new tech. It became a tapestry of human resilience and creativity intertwined with innovation. Meanwhile, Emma found herself traveling more, speaking at conferences, meeting with local leaders, and fostering partnerships. The challenge was immense. Cultural differences, political hurdles, and infrastructure gaps required patience and flexibility. Yet, every new city added proof that decentralized living wasn't just possible, it was thriving. Back in Nova City, life settled into a new rhythm. The initial struggles gave way to routines powered by community trust. Public forums became vibrant spaces where residents shaped policies, resolved disputes, and celebrated milestones. Energy consumption dropped as neighbors shared resources and innovated new solutions. Schools integrated sustainability into every subject, inspiring a generation to think differently about their relationship to the planet and technology. Daniel Rivera had become a mentor to new residents, sharing his story of loss and renewal, embodying the hope Nova City represented. Tamika, now 16, led youth initiatives teaching coding, energy management, and environmental stewardship. Emma watched them with pride, realizing that the city was more than a prototype, it was a living, breathing community. However, Nova World's rapid growth also drew scrutiny from governments and corporations fearing disruption. Lobbyists intensified their campaigns, some cities faced bureaucratic roadblocks, and in a few places, protests erupted between supporters and detractors. Emma knew that balancing innovation with regulation would be critical. She worked closely with Congresswoman Lane and international allies to draft new frameworks recognizing decentralized cities as legitimate, sovereign communities. The process was complex, involving negotiations, compromises, and ongoing dialogue. Public opinion remained mixed, while many embraced the possibilities, others feared the unknown. Through it all, Emma maintained a message of unity and optimism. Change is never easy, she often said. But when people come together to build something better, they create a future worth fighting for. On a personal level, Emma found herself growing in ways she hadn't anticipated. The journey from the initial struggles of Nova City to leading a global movement had tested her resilience, empathy, and leadership. She had learned to navigate conflict with grace, to inspire trust amid uncertainty, and to find strength in community. Her relationships deepened, with Daniel, who had become a steadfast friend, with Tamika, who reminded her daily of the future's promise, and with the countless volunteers and residents who believed in the vision. One evening, as Emma walked through Nova City's Central Park, lanterns glowing softly in the twilight, she felt a profound sense of peace. Children played near gardens flourishing under solar lights, neighbors gathered to share meals, and the hum of renewable energy systems whispered in the background. The city was alive, not just with technology, but with hope. Yet, Emma knew that the journey was far from over. The architects had not vanished. Their influence lurked in shadows, and new challenges loomed on the horizon, from climate crises to geopolitical tensions. But Nova World had planted a seed that no amount of opposition could easily uproot. It was a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring power of community. As she looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky, Emma smiled. The future wasn't a distant dream, it was being built here, now, by people who dared to believe. And she was proud to be part of that story. The dawn of decentralized living brought more than new technology, it ignited a cultural revolution. Emma found herself at the heart of this transformation, navigating a world where traditional values collided with unprecedented innovation. As Nova World expanded, it became clear that building cities wasn't just about infrastructure or energy, it was about reshaping how people lived, worked, and connected. In the sprawling urban center of Nova City, the effects were visible everywhere. Cafes doubled as community hubs where neighbors debated governance proposals, schools taught digital citizenship alongside history, and art installations celebrated both technology and nature. Public spaces were designed to foster interaction and creativity, breaking down barriers that had once kept people isolated. Emma often visited these spots, watching as families, entrepreneurs, and students mingled in a vibrant tapestry of cultures and ideas. This new way of living demanded new skills and mindsets. Collaboration replaced competition as the dominant ethos. People volunteered their expertise to help neighbors, shared resources through digital platforms, and participated in decisions via blockchain-based voting systems. The concept of ownership evolved into stewardship, caring for community assets rather than possessing them outright. Yet, the shift wasn't seamless. Resistance came from deep-rooted fears and skepticism. Some residents clung to familiar hierarchies, uneasy with the fluid dynamics of decentralized governance. Others struggled with the pace of change, overwhelmed by new technologies or wary of surveillance disguised as transparency. Emma recognized these tensions and prioritized education and dialogue. Workshops, forums, and mentorship programs became pillars of community life, helping people adapt and thrive. Across Nova World's sister cities, cultural expressions flourished, blending tradition with innovation. In Brazil, indigenous practices merged with sustainable tech to preserve ecosystems. Germany's urban renewal celebrated its industrial heritage while embracing green futures. Kenya's coastal villages wove storytelling and technology to preserve identity amid change. South Korea's tech hubs balanced rapid progress with social harmony. Emma marveled at this mosaic of human experience, convinced that the future lay not in one model but in a constellation of diverse, resilient communities connected by shared values. Scaling Nova World's vision presented immense challenges. Infrastructure had to be customized for different geographies and economies. Legal systems often conflicted with decentralized governance, requiring complex negotiations. Funding was a constant hurdle, as investors hesitated to back unproven models. Political opposition lurked everywhere, fueled by vested interests threatened by disruption. Emma's leadership evolved accordingly. She became a bridge builder, mediating between technologists, governments, activists, and citizens. Her days were packed with calls, meetings, and public appearances, but she carved out time to listen deeply to those affected by change. Her empathy became as vital as her strategic acumen. At international summits, she spoke passionately about the need for inclusive innovation that respected cultural differences and empowered communities. Technology is a tool, she said. But people are the architects of their future. Behind the scenes, Emma worked closely with Musk and the Bright Network team to refine Nexus protocol, making it more adaptable and user-friendly. She championed open-source principles to ensure transparency and foster collaboration. She also emphasized cybersecurity, knowing that as Nova World grew, so did its vulnerabilities. In quieter moments, Emma reflected on her own journey, from a determined idealist fighting to save a single city to a global leader shaping a movement. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but so was the sense of purpose. She found strength in the stories of residents who had transformed their lives and in the collective hope that fueled Nova World. Emma's relationships deepened as well. Daniel Rivera, now a seasoned advocate and community organizer, remained her closest confidant. Together, they navigated the complexities of leadership and personal growth. Tamika blossomed into a young leader herself, inspiring youth to embrace innovation with heart. Their shared vision created a bond that transcended challenges. The architect's threats persisted, but Nova World's resilience grew stronger. Emma's team developed advanced monitoring systems to detect and counter cyber attacks and misinformation campaigns. The global network fostered solidarity, with cities supporting each other through resource sharing and rapid response teams. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emma stood on Nova City's rooftop, gazing at the stars. The city's lights twinkled below, a testament to human ingenuity and community spirit. She felt a surge of gratitude and resolve. The path ahead was uncertain, but the journey was worth every sacrifice. As she whispered to the night, "This is just the beginning." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?